So I'm here with Hannah Mears. She's a Penn State alum. She's also a sports producer at KDKA, works for the Big Ten Network, Westmoreland Sports, does work with the Pirates, Steelers, and Penguins, and also has a new podcast called Beers with Mears. Hannah, how you doing today?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
So just jumping right into it, my first question to you would be, was being a journalist or sideline reporter something you always wanted to do?
No, actually, I wanted to be a doctor growing up of some sort, going to the healthcare field for sure. I always loved babies, so looking into pediatrics and being a nurse in a NICU, that was always sort of the dream. And I'd always pursued different medical routes, even in high school. But then I just sort of felt like that was the safe choice. There was something else in me that I felt like that wasn't really what I was meant to do. When I started looking at colleges and I applied to Penn State, I applied undecided. And then they had sort of a new student orientation, like in the summer before you even went to your orientation as a freshman. And I sat through a couple of different lectures, one about the nursing school and then one about the School of Communications. And when I saw the School of Communications and the different routes that you could pursue, something ticked in me. And I was like, yep, this is it. This is where I want to be. And then I shadowed and was a runner for ESPN when they came to cover Steelers training camp that summer, like a couple weeks later. And I knew from that point on, that's exactly where I was meant to be.
There was no close second. It was Penn State always.
Yeah, I actually was committed to play soccer at a smaller school in Waynesburg, Division III, just to go play soccer. I wanted to box for a little. And then I also, so like in the off season, that's what I would have been doing. And then I wanted to become a nurse. So that was like sort of the plan, but something in me just like, I didn't really care to find a roommate, to like figure out what I wanted to really do. Like there was something in me that was just off. And then once I got accepted to Penn State, I just felt like, oh yeah, this is exactly where I want to be. I remember telling my mom in like 10th grade, I wanted to go somewhere that had a huge football school and like was really sports oriented because I had such a passion for sports. And so it just kind of seemed like a no-brainer that once I got accepted, something was like really excited. Something in me made me feel more excited and more passionate about that. So giving up soccer was really, really hard, but it ended up being the best decision ever because I was able to pursue things pretty full force once I got to Penn State for my career.
Growing up throughout high school, were those like your two main sports? Were you like an all-around athlete?
So I never really boxed. Boxing was something my soccer coach at Waynesburg told me she was like good at and could train me in. So for some reason, that was just like really interesting to me for like a lot of my off-season training. I was going to pursue that. But I played soccer, basketball, and track growing up. So those were my three main sports. Soccer like had my heart. That was like my heart and soul. So giving that up was like the hardest decision ever. But my brother wrestled, played football, and you know, all the things. We were always involved in sports. So for the most part, sports were just a huge part of our lives since we could walk, essentially. So boxing was just one of those things I thought would be a fun hobby. My mom wasn't such a fan of me pursuing that because she's a dental hygienist and she's like, you're going to get your teeth knocked out. So that would have just been something to train on the side. But yeah, soccer, basketball, and track were my three main sports growing up.
Were there any like media production classes you took in high school like to help you prepare for college?
Yeah, so Latrobe, I went to Greater Latrobe. It's about like 45 minutes outside of Pittsburgh. They have an excellent journalism program and so many resources for students. However, at that point, I still wanted to be a doctor, so I did none of it. The only time I ever did anything like journalism related was in sixth grade. In our elementary school, we had like morning announcements and they actually had like a production little program you could do. And I was a student basically like news anchor on there. And I loved doing that. I've always loved public speaking. My writing classes were always my favorite. My English classes, like that's where I've always excelled. But for some reason, when you're in high school, you know, you only think of career paths as I can go to be a doctor, a teacher, a lawyer, like your main careers that everybody talks about. And I just don't think it was presented to me in a way that like this could be my passion and this could be my job and this could be what I wanted to do until I got to college and really saw that that was a possibility and like this is how these people get to where they are. So in high school, I was taking all my anatomies and biologies and classes like that. And then it sort of just kind of hit me once I got to college. But Latrobe does have an amazing program that I look back on and thinking about all the ways I could have been a step ahead my freshman year if I would have pursued those classes.
What was your experience like going to Penn State? Because I know for me, Point Park, we're a bit of a smaller school, like as opposed to like Pitt. And I know Penn State, you know, Happy Valley, like you have over 100,000 people every Saturday for football games. So just like talk me through that experience. Just you're on a campus with a lot of people. What is that like?
The best thing that ever happened to me was I was accepted to summer session at Penn State. So I had to attend the summer session to like fully get into college, which was the best thing ever because you get to experience it at a slower rate with less people at first. So you get to know the campus, know where your classes are, figure out how to do college with a less amount of pressure, essentially, with all these people. So that really helped ease me into the experience because your first day and your first class of freshman year is a lot. Like there are people everywhere, like swarms of kids. You're so confused of where to go. So it can be a little overwhelming. But once you really start getting into a lot of your major classes by your like sophomore year, it's really small. Like a lot of the big classes and lectures I took were either for like some of my minor classes with business where I was taking like a 700 person lecture for accounting or, you know, this X amount of people for marketing, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, all of my journalism classes, I knew a lot of people in my program. There was like 14 of us in a class, 20 of us in a class. So it seems big, but it's really not. You're not taking 100 person lectures all of the time. Most of the time, there was only about 20 kids per class. So it wasn't bad at all. And if anything, it just having that many people made the experience that much better because you build an alumni network and you meet so many new people every single day. So it was a great experience from that aspect, but not as overwhelming as what some people might think.
Following up on that, so I'm assuming that like being in these journalism schools at not Point Park, but Penn State, it probably affords you a chance to cover Penn State sports, right?
Yeah, so I had a pretty unique experience, I would say, as compared to what I think a normal student experience is like. I was pretty much a part-time employee my entire time in college. I got hired to do on-camera work my freshman year, and it built from there to getting like paid to do it and covering events. So I was on the football sidelines doing reporting for Beaver Stadium Extra, and which is under Penn State Athletics. And then I was sidelining different basketball games, volleyball games, different things like that. I was in arena hosting. So there was a ton of experience from that aspect covering all of those sports for sure.
Did you think that helped prepare you for like post-college as far as looking for jobs and things of that nature?
Yeah, so I would say, it helped prepare me just for post-college work in general because it taught you how to work super hard. You were always competing against a lot of people, but at the same time, it put me in the atmospheres and environments that I didn't have to be intimidated by later. Being in front of 110,000 people, learning how to talk to people and interview and listen when you really can't hear prepared me more than anything. So just getting a lot of reps on reps on reps. And then 2020, though, I graduated right in the pandemic. Like I finished all my classes online at home. COVID became a thing. It was very hard to apply for a job. Thankfully, I at least had a full reel when I graduated college, which helped. But then Westmoreland Sports Network had to stream everything in my local area for sports. So I was ready to step in front of a camera and be on the sidelines because of my experience at Penn State. And then Westmoreland Sports Network gave me a platform that didn't feel like as much pressure at first with all these eyeballs on you to just sort of get those reps out. And then that really helped me for later on when I started doing stuff for the Steelers and the Big Ten Network. It just makes you feel comfortable. Every rep you take makes you feel more comfortable for the next one at a bigger stage. So Penn State helped prepare me immensely for that. I had so much experience for sure throughout my 4 years there.
I do want to ask you about COVID though. So you graduated in 2020, first three and a half years, so forth. College life. That last semester for you, like, first of all, how challenging was it for you to finish under those circumstances? And then secondly, how did COVID like impact you personally? Not so much like did you have it or not, but just like as far as disruptive everyday life.
It would have been harder for me if COVID, I feel more for the students who were juniors, who were sophomores, who were the seniors the next year, because it held up a lot of their internship opportunities and it was a bigger hindrance to their career. By my senior year, everything I had done was pretty much done. I had just gone to the Super Bowl and covered it. Like I got some really amazing experiences. So I tried not to let it get me down in that aspect. I did get the wrestling national championships taken away from me to cover, which was always a dream of mine. I'm a huge wrestling girl. So that one hurt, but there were people that were affected by that much more than I was. And the important thing was, a lot of people, everyone that I knew that was getting COVID was healthy and safe afterwards. So that was more than anything. But I would say personally, it affected me seeing how it affected people around me. My boyfriend was ranked number 1 going into the National Wrestling Championships for Ohio State, and that got ripped away from him. And having to watch him like handle that was really hard. I felt horrible for somebody who worked for something his whole life. And I had a ton of friends that was affecting. And then to see them not get that year back the next year because they gave it to the class after them, which still made no sense. But there's so many people that affected in a really big way that when I look back, I was very fortunate that the only thing it took away from me was one small opportunity. And weeks before I was at the Super Bowl, so I had no reason to be upset with it. But then, it did affect your daily life, not being able to see my grandparents a lot and being careful where you were. And then I got COVID and I held my week-old goddaughter a couple days before, and I was gutted, hoping she didn't get it. And thankfully, everything was fine. But I think COVID was hard on everyone. But looking from a professional standpoint, I'm very blessed to know that none of the opportunities were ever super detrimental to what I had done. And the most important thing was everyone around me was healthy.
So it's like you mentioned opportunities. So going back to that, just talk to me about maybe opportunities you had, establishing connections with maybe famous people, things of that nature.
My first opportunity I had, essentially, I went up and introduced myself to one of my professors in college, kind of let them know what my passion was. He was one of my sports business professors, and he's incredible still in my life today and providing opportunities when he can and providing advice anytime I reach out. He's phenomenal. But I would say my professors really helped me with a lot of these opportunities. Getting to know your professors is so important in this industry because A, they've been there, done that, but B, they have this network of connections and they're always talking with people. And so he helped me get an internship with Penn State Athletics. I thought I was originally just going to be an intern that was helping write different things and get audio recordings and things like that. And then they told me about the on-camera position they were offering me, and it was a sink or swim opportunity. Essentially, I had to either go out there and do it and be good, or if I did bad, I was no longer going to have an internship. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. I did okay, and they decided to take a chance on me from there. So I became the Penn State Athletics Beaver Stadium extra reporter for my time in college, which meant I was reporting on all things around the football game that wasn't exactly the football game itself. So alumni coming back to visit, celebrities that were on the field that day, different types of branding inside and outside of the game to put out as much as we could surrounding a Penn State football game in itself. So when you're talking about celebrities, I got to interview Joe Jonas, which was awesome. A bunch of the guys who are now in the NFL, the likes of Saquon Barkley, Mike Gesicki, Miles Sanders, Jason Kabinda, the list goes on, because Penn State has a phenomenal network of now NFL players. But a lot of those people were my friends as well, sitting in my classes with me for years. So that was cool to have those types of connections. And then from whatever Beaver Stadium ended up being, we took that to covering basketball. And then the Big Ten Network did student union broadcasts, and I sidelined those games, did an arena hosting for wrestling and basketball, which was really cool. So that was part of what my experience was too. So I would say I was fortunate. Some of my internship was paid because of how much I was asked to do. I was starting to have to cover events like a professional would. So I went to the 2019 NFL Combine, and I was the person covering all of the Penn State athletes there, from everything that they were doing, from media to on-field drills to all of the bench press, which was insane. So I was doing all the video, all the social media, all of the reporting, everything, which was crazy. But that helped prepare me more than anything, because I was literally getting thrown into the fire, had really never even flown on a plane before, and was getting flown to Indianapolis in the matter of days of finding out. So that was a really cool experience. So Penn State has a lot of opportunities to provide, but more than anything, it's how you take advantage of them and how you build the network from there. And to say it was a blessing is an understatement, but it was also a lot of really hard work. There was a lot of sacrifice, not being able to go out when you wanted with your friends, missing birthday parties and all the fun things people were doing. I would be on my way to sideline a game, or not being able to go out the night before a football game like everyone else, because I had to be up at 6 a.m. to stay in the stadium till 1 a.m. So there was a lot of sacrifice for sure. And then, a lot of times with different internships, you don't get a ton of financial stability with that. So I was also working, babysitting while working at a tanning salon, waitress here and there. So while also maintaining a full course load. So it's never easy, but it's always worth it. So the opportunities were definitely there, and I'm beyond thankful for them.
Now, just to follow up, I was going to ask you about the Super Bowl. Was that provided by Penn State to that opportunity, or was that something totally different?
Yes. So Penn State has amazing connections. The professors are always looking for ways to get students these opportunities, which is incredible. Like most communication colleges do provide their students with just these awesome experiences. I don't really know all the ins and outs of how it happened. Truthfully, I just know I have amazing professors, and one of them was able to get together a crew of some students to go provide coverage for the Center Daily Times, which is a newspaper in State College, but then also whatever type of content we could grab. Where I was utilized more and where I put myself essentially was doing a lot more of the social media content. I just started interviewing people that I found. I found Mike Gesicki. I was like, hey, you want to do an interview? Found Saquon Barkley, Laura Rutledge, just pulling people around. And It was awesome. I wish I had been even more prepared, not knowing what Radio Row was going to be like and stuff, because when you get there, you realize you have more access than you would think you would, which is great. So I wish I would have had more of like a microphone with my phone and things like that, but you sort of just show up and kind of try to stay out of the way. But it was awesome. Like Radio Row is so cool. You run into some really awesome people. You see the sets of things that are going on, all weekend long. And then we got to go and actually sit in press row. We were a part of the media for the Super Bowl. And it was the Super Bowl down in Miami, the Chiefs and the Niners, where the Chiefs had a big comeback. It was so much fun. Shakira and J-Lo, the halftime performance, that experience was out of this world. And I know that Penn State tries to do something like that every year. They had some students go again, but they try to alternate sometimes between like March Madness, the Super Bowl, and some of these different opportunities to make sure they're diversifying the experience for students. But boy, was I blessed to be able to go and have professors that have built relationships and worked so hard to put us in those situations.
Now, like we've talked a lot about basketball, football, like wrestling. Is there a sport in particular you love to cover the most?
It's a good question. The sport I love more than anything is wrestling. That's where my heart is in terms of, I really want to see a female presence there. I was covering mat side reporting for different events and then youth events and high school events, all ages, interviewing 8-year-olds to 25-year-olds and trying to really make a female presence there, because female wrestling is growing rapidly. And I think it's important to have a female presence in that space. And on top of that, I've just always had a soft spot for it. It's what I've grown up loving. So I love being there and providing people with an interesting perspective. I would say the sport that I'm probably the most knowledgeable about in terms of sports betting now is my full-time job, being a sports betting analyst and things like that. Football was definitely, like in the NFL, definitely the most intriguing, just because there's so much that goes into it, so much you can bet on, so much you can analyze and talk about. And you see everything going on now with free agency and seeing some really big name players getting thrown around and traded to different teams. So there's a lot more at stake sometimes in that sport, which is why it's fun to cover. But I would say my niche area and something that's unique about me that I love is the fact that I can cover wrestling, and not a ton of people, let alone females, can say they can do that.
So you mentioned having more female presence in wrestling, but at the same time, like kind of focus on something else. So like, what I'm hearing so far is like you're pretty diverse as far as what you cover. How important do you think that is for like a journalist or just even a media practitioner to kind of like put your hand in like a bunch of different things, whether it be basketball, football, hockey, like whatever?
So important. So important. I mean, as a female, like you were saying, it's really important to know, to set yourself up with as much knowledge as possible, because there still are, I mean, it's getting much better for women in this space, but there's still always, you feel like when you walk into certain rooms, people are already questioning your intelligence and your knowledge about something. Now, not everyone will do that, but you still feel like that sometimes. You feel like you have to prove a little bit of yourself, but it's important just to know everything, because sports in general, like covering wrestling, for example, these guys and girls are not used to talking to the media whatsoever. They don't get a ton of media attention. Now it's getting better as the sport grows and you get attention when you're at the highest level. But these kids in junior high, elementary school, high school, they weren't getting media coverage. So to get them to say more than 2 words sometimes can be challenging, because A, they're scared. They just came off the mat. They're exhausted. And so to get them to really speak to you was hard. And that was an awesome challenge for me to really pull that information from people. So then I was able to transfer that into how I ask questions in football and how you ask questions covering hockey and basketball and et cetera. The list goes on. It made me a better journalist. It made me a better question asker, if you want to say. It just made me better. I think that's why it's important to put your hands in so many things. I also tell people it's just as important to know what you don't want to do as it is what you do want to do. Now, in the field of journalism, you might have opportunities that you take just to build yourself, your resume, and get the skills, and you might not love it, and tough luck. That's how the industry goes. But the last thing you want to do is really invest yourself into something you're not passionate about pursuing when, push comes to shove. So, for example, it might be amazing to get this job opportunity. Let's say it's from ESPN and you're so excited about it, but it's covering something you're not at all passionate about. You want nothing to do with. And then another job offer comes around. It's for like the sport of your dreams. You can't wait, but it might be on a lesser scale, but that's where like you feel like you're going to grow the most because you're going to want to invest your time in. And then you sort of have to compare, do I go for a name or do I go for what's passionate and going to build me up? So I think this industry kind of tricks your mind in that way, where people say to you, oh, like, why aren't you on ESPN yet? And it's like, well, why is what I'm doing not good enough yet? So you sort of have to put that in perspective and be really careful with who you're listening to and what their advice is, because you might be really, really happy in a space and covering something, and no, it might not be ESPN, but it's really great where you are, and that's okay. So I think, a long roundabout answer to your question is it's so important to cover everything and just know, do I like it? Do I not? Am I good at it? Am I not? And give yourself those really hard self-evaluations sometimes. It's just very important. So that way you're moving through this in a really responsible way with your time and energy, and making sure you're really getting utilized to show off your skill sets in the best way that you can.
So you touched upon it too, like when you were talking about having to prove yourself. So, there's a bunch of comments, oh, well, that's weird coming from a woman, or like, oh, sports, that kind of stuff. Like, I don't want to assume that you ever dealt with anything, but have you ever dealt with something of those kind of experiences along the lines, if that makes any sense?
Oh, yeah. Professionally, I would say not as much, because once you're in professional spaces, a lot of the men that I have worked with have been so supportive of me, have done nothing but put me in spaces to succeed. When I started working for Westmoreland Sports, they never asked a single question about how much I knew about football. They put me on the sidelines and trusted me, and I grew from there. And I was like, that was really cool. They never even, not that they didn't do their due diligence, they just trusted that I had covered so much that I wasn't stupid. The same thing with wrestling, and the same thing with, a lot of the places that I've worked, from the Steelers to the Big Ten, the Penguins, the Pirates. Everybody has been so supportive, and especially at KDKA as well. I have had guys there that I've worked with that have been some of the best mentors I've ever had and spoken with and talked to, and have been so supportive of me. So I think I've had a very positive experience with men. But then I also see it on the other end, where I hear stories from females that it's just, it's sad. And one time in college, I was at a restaurant with my friend. We were in a sports bar, and I was staring at a TV because it was the 2020 NFL comp. Well, it would have been the 2020 NFL Combine, whatever it had been, on the TV. And I was sitting there watching it, and it was just really funny because some guy came over and goes, "Excuse me, can I help you? I see that you're staring at me." And I was like, "I'm sorry, I wasn't staring at you. I was looking at the TV behind you. We were watching the combine. I apologize if you took that the wrong way. But no, I wasn't looking at you." And he's like, "Well, why would a girl be watching that? What do you know about it?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm really not here for this conversation, but thank you. I was watching the TV. You can politely go back to your seat." And my best friend stood up and she's like, "You know what? This girl covered the combine last year, and she was there for Penn State, and she knows much more than you do." And this kid was just blown away. He's like, "Wait, you were there?" And I was like, "I really don't feel like talking about this with you, because you just assumed, because I'm a girl, because I'm sitting here in a space that it's a sports bar atmosphere, that, I must know nothing right now about football." And so that was an experience that sticks with me, because I really don't care to explain that to people, because I feel if you're asking, it's your ignorance, not mine. And it's something that they need to talk to themselves about. I don't need to explain myself to you that this is what I do and this is who I am. But she was not having it. She was not happy. So love my friend Amanda for that. But no, I'm not someone who's going to tell people and shove that down their throat. I'm just going to work quietly and do my own thing. But there are definitely way more instances like that than you would think. And I always feel I have to come more prepared sometimes. If there was a guy broadcaster making a point, he doesn't have to give you 5 reasons as to why he came up with that. He can just say it. Whereas if I feel I make an assumption and say something that's my opinion, I have to come up with 10 reasons as to why this is what it is. And so I think there's always a little bit of stigma, but I think it's also a lot of women just working hard to want to not have to say, "I'm a woman in sports. I'm just a broadcaster in sports as well." So there'll always be a little bit of that. But for the most part, my experiences have been super positive.
Now, we've kind of touched on the more human experiences. I do want to go on social media, because I think it's not just a female thing, but I'm sure it's worse for you guys. But you see how people are on social media, Twitter more specifically. Do you ever get any comments that are kind of tasteless, or forget
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can probably elaborate more on it.
So I work for Picks and Parlays. It's a sports betting company. I do sports betting picks on the daily, every day of the week, and I get so many inappropriate comments on there, just a ton. And it's really obnoxious. Honestly, it's just annoying. I don't really address them, but that's also the hard part about being a female, just I feel in general anymore in this world with social media. Joy Taylor said this before. She's like, social media is great because it gives everyone a voice. It's also bad because it gives everyone a voice.
Yeah.
So people are going to say what they want to say regardless. You just kind of have to shake it off and just take it as a compliment, move on. Because at this point, like, what else am I going to do? Fight with somebody for saying that? Hopefully you used my bet and it won you some money today. You know, that's what I think. But then there's also, it used to really bother me in college. People would ask what I wanted to be, and I said a sports broadcaster, being on the sidelines, etc. And the first thing then would say would be, "Oh, you have the look for it." I was like, "Excuse me, what does the look even mean, first off? And second of all, you didn't even ask if I knew anything about sports." And I would tell them that straight up, and they would get like offended. And I was like, "Well, you just offended me. Like, you don't even know what I know." So there are definitely still some words that are said out there that are inappropriate, and some comments that shouldn't be made. And I think it's something that females have to unfairly deal with every single day. But I've seen just so many people watching the way they handle it. And Joy Taylor's an awesome example of how to handle people like that. And just to know there's women dealing with it and handling it for us to pave a way to help us now be bigger in this space and find our way in this space without having to deal with that or how to handle it, is just, it makes me feel really good that I have all these women trailblazing the way for me too.
I do want to ask though, like, is there like a fine line for you between like reading comments or just like ignoring comments? Because I know for me, I struggle with that. But like you said, you'll have those like detractors that like really like stick with you, even though they might be like smaller in size. Like for you personally, you might be better at it now. Did you ever let the negative ones affect you that much, or did you just like keep pushing along?
Yeah, I think it's human. I think everyone does, right? We're all people pleasers in our own right. And it's hurtful when people say things. But for the most part, I think something that I've always tried to do, I think more than just comments, is I concern sometimes about my public appearance in terms of not how I look dressed and everything, but my social media presence. I would say in college, I had seen so many females particularly get so upset about not getting enough likes on social media or people commenting things and just being so caught up in it. And it was really heartbreaking to watch that. And so in college, I made the conscious choice to make all of my social media pretty much revolve around my work and some, personal photos of family and things like that. But for the most part, my social media is pretty clean. Like, if anyone's going to look at it, what you see is what you get. I'm not afraid if my family members are following me and what they might see, because I know that's always a stigma and things like that. And so that sort of helped me be in a better headspace about comments you receive and things like that, because it's my work. And if you don't like my work, that's your opinion. And if you do, you may follow me and hopefully you like it. And thank you for the follow. But I think a lot of the time too, that comments, whether they're positive or negative, you should always take everything with a grain of salt, first of all. But also, sometimes the comments that are bad, they teach you something. You're like, I could have done that better. But at the same time, I'm going to take advice from the people who have been there and done that and who I consider mentors, because everyone wants to be your mentor. Everyone wants to give you advice. Everyone wants to give you positive or negative feedback. I mean, even my grandparents, your family, your aunts, your uncles, and even if positive or negative criticism, all of it's great. But everyone in this space wants to give you advice, and you just have to be careful who you take it from. I'm going to trust the people who have been here from the beginning for me and who I know are always going to give me criticism in a positive way, whether it's what I want to hear or not. It's going to help me grow. And that's the most important feedback that I take. You
pretty much answered the next question I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, whether it's from a professional or just someone you know?
It's a good question. I've gotten so much great advice over the years from so many amazing people. I would say that one of the pieces of advice was definitely knowing who's really in your corner and not taking advice from everyone in such a big way. Because if you do take advice from everyone, then you'll always be trying to please everyone and you'll kind of forget yourself along the way. So being your most authentic self was always something I was very passionate about. And some people will try to change that in you along the way. But if you know that deep down you can't be anyone else and you won't be happy being someone else, that's how I felt. You're going to have people that love and respect you for that. And so far that's worked for me. And if it hasn't, then, that's a space that I probably wouldn't have wanted to be in to begin with, because this is who I am. And when you're talking to me right now, this is exactly who I want to portray on the TV screen or wherever it might be. So I would say being my most authentic self as well. And definitely the little piece I gave you earlier about it's just as important to know what you don't want to do as what you do want to do so that you're not exhausting yourself in a space. I learned that by going to a trip to New York with a Penn State class, and we got to see some amazing things. We went to Good Morning America, and we got to go see all the 9/11 memorial stuff. And it was just really moving and a really passion-driven project that they let us go on, which was cool. But we also went to the New York Times. And when you see a name like the New York Times, you would think, I want to work there. Absolutely, 100%. And I'm sure the people that work there, that is their drive, their passion, their everything. And if you would have asked me at that point, if like the New York Times offered me a job as that age in college, I would have been like gung-ho, putting everything into it. But after being there for like 30 minutes, I was like, oh my God, I can't ever be here. This is not a place I want to work. And that's just like my personal opinion, because I just felt like that was a space I would not thrive in. But after visiting there, like, thank goodness I knew that, because my professor kind of apologized to some of us, being like, I hope that wasn't a negative experience for some of you. I know some of you didn't like it. And I was like, it's just as important to know now that like I don't want to be there. So that way I'm not like tempted that if they would have offered me a job opportunity instead of somebody else, that I picked them because they were the bigger name, you know? So that's always a thing in broadcast to look for, is don't get always distracted by the shiniest offer and what would be seems like the best name to, so you could tell people you work at so and so, but really you could be miserable in that. So it's just as important sometimes to know what you don't want to do.
You mentioned Joy Taylor a couple times, and that's another question I wanted to ask you. Like, just growing up, or not even so much growing up, when you were in the field, was there like a particular person, female, male, like whoever in the industry that you looked up to and said, hey, like this guy is, or this girl or this lady is the gold standard for what I want to be one day?
There's so many people, so many, because everyone does such interesting and different things. I would say I always loved the way Maria Taylor approached journalism. She really set a new standard for how you can be more casual and conversational. And I really loved her approach and everything she's done. I've always really respected Joy Taylor and where she comes from and her background. And she's a Pittsburgh girl who's really made her own and gave a voice in a very male-dominated side of things, where it was like sports radio and more so sports arguments back and forth. And she really gave a voice in that with the Herd and Colin Cowherd. I would say Erin Andrews is sort of the gold standard in the NFL. Everyone really respects her for what she's been able to do for so long. So she was always somebody. I loved Kay Adams on Good Morning Football, and now Jamie Erdahl has gotten into that space and is fantastic. And I really appreciate women like Laura Rutledge and her hosting ability, Mina Kimes and her analytics skills, and then even Holly Rowe and the way that she covers female sports in such a big way, where it almost seems like, you know, she's constantly having to give them the validity that they need because there's not as many people like her. And I think it's so awesome of her. The men that I've really grown up watching now in this industry, Jay Billis is such an amazing mentor in person. He's the gold standard for how to treat people in this industry and be a human while also being a huge celebrity in this industry. He doesn't act like it at all. Ryan Clark was somebody who hated the media growing up playing football, and now he's sort of a part of the media. He is the media, and he's been someone who, you know, has dropped everything and been there for me too, and he has very strong opinions that he will always back up. So there's a lot of people, the list could go on and on and on, but honestly, there's just, you know, there's the Melissa Starks who started everything. Like there are so many people, I couldn't just pick one, but there's just a lot that I've sort of, the people that I feel like I gravitate to the most are the ones that come off the most authentic and are themselves. And I feel like that's more than anything what I've just wanted to do. I wouldn't say that I've tried to be like somebody, but I've always tried to be me, to be like them and with them in this space.
But I want to like kind of shift back to like the sideline reporter stuff. So, you know, like you mentioned Erin Andrews, Holly Rowe, all those people that are on the sidelines for football, basketball. For you personally, I was always curious how sideline reporters like prep for games, because I know you have play-by-play guys. They have their own little spiel of how they prepare. As far as sideline reporters, I know you're not on camera as much as play-by-play guys, though, but there still has to be like a level of preparation there. Am I right or wrong here?
Oh, yeah, 100,000%. There are typically like thousands of quotes or stories that you have as a sideline reporter that you don't even use throughout a game. Because that either doesn't play out or this player doesn't perform to where you have something to say about them, whatever the case may be. But I'm doing a ton of homework for a sideline reporting. Even for the Big Ten Network, I wasn't doing the actual sidelining for the game. I was doing more pre and post game hits for the network. And I was still sitting in every press conference I could, asking every question I could, getting information as if I was to be on the sidelines is how I was preparing. High school is even harder to prepare for because you don't have information at hand. You have to pry, call coaches, call kids, like look on social medias to find information. I mean, you are preparing as if you were about to take the biggest test of your life every single week to make sure that no matter what happens, you're prepared for that situation every way possible to have something to say about it. So I would say it's a lot of like you're preparing for the biggest test of your life every week because you never want to be the person who doesn't know something.
As far as jobs go in media, like whatever, what's your favorite?
No, I don't really know if I have a favorite. I feel like everything's great in its own way. At KDK, they've been giving me a lot of opportunities to also be on camera, and the sports producing side gives you a lot of perspective and respect for the people who are cutting the video and putting it out there, because that's what I'm doing, and making the graphics and making sure the shows are clean. So that's giving you the respect for the people behind the scenes. And then I also did videography work, so you know how important camera angles are and getting a shot is. And then I've done the on-camera work and I've done the writing of it. So every one of my jobs has prepared me to be, I feel like, the most well-rounded person in a space, to respect everyone that you're around and know that everyone has a job to do and each job is equally as important. And if your audio guy isn't there to make sure the audio sounds good, then it doesn't matter what you look like on camera because you're not going to sound good or no one's going to hear you or vice versa. So everything is so important and every job that I have is important, and it's given me a skill set that I hope will take me to the next level or will benefit me in some way. And the sports betting stuff has gotten so important because it's such a growing field in this industry. It's only going to continue to get bigger. So just being able to push myself and analyze sports from that perspective has been really interesting. So I would say everything has its pros and cons, but for the most part, I would say I can't pick a favorite because each one of them has prepared me in every single way possible.
So I was going to ask you about like your job at KDK being a sports producer, and obviously there's a lot of things public doesn't know, like behind the scenes of what you got to do to prep for shows. If you can you go more in depth into like what does it entails to be a sports producer at KDK?
Yeah, so you come in, you speak with your anchor who's going to be there that night. So let's say it's Bob Pompiani, who's a fantastic coworker and human. And you just kind of talk about, let's back up. The night before, you have this previous sports producer kind of put together the sports plan saying who's going to be there, what shoots you might have, and what games you need to have recorded. So let's say you needed to have the Pitt basketball March Madness game recorded because you're going to do highlights of that. Maybe you have wrestling on ESPN because the NCAA championships are going on for that as well. So you know there's certain things recording that you as a sports producer are going to want highlights of. So you kind of talk with your anchor and you say, what are you seeing today? What have you seen? What kind of big news is going on? And you sort of collaborate. So it's like you start, let's say like the Penguins played, you know, you're going to talk about that and have highlights. Then you're going to go into the next big topic, which could be the Steelers and everything with free agency. Then you could talk about like Pitt basketball and the highlights, then mention something with Pitt wrestling or like West Virginia, Penn State, any of the local sports as well, things that are happening on a national schedule. So it's really just paying attention to storylines to sort of put your rundown together is what it's called. So, you know, that way when you guys see it on TV, you're seeing they're talking about the Penguins, the Steelers, Pitt, Penn State, etc. And so we're putting that whole rundown together. Then we're going in and we're finding the footage, the video, whether it's stuff from the previous night or cutting the highlights as they're happening for that night. And that's all a collaboration from the producer to the anchor being like, what do you think are the most important plays to show? What would you prefer? And then you're going in and putting in your graphics and the scores and things like that. And then it's ready to hit the air and the anchor will go in and write their scripts from there. And you kind of handled everything else and kind of repeats every night after that.
Sounds like an interesting job and a fun one too at it too. Now, like I was going through some of like your work and stuff and your LinkedIn too. And I'm assuming you just started like a new like position with the Pirates. Am I correct me if I'm wrong there?
Absolutely. So I've only worked for them really twice so far because they're down in spring training. So, but that will amp up as the season starts. So I'm excited for that. But I was hired as an on-camera personality. They really haven't had an on-camera like social media personality before. Someone like me in the space, they've had, you know, broadcasters and things like that, but it's a fairly new position. It's what sort of the other sports teams do have though in the area. So I'm very excited to see how that grows and how to be utilized in that space. But I'm very excited about that opportunity and what it could bring because I've so far absolutely loved every single person that is in that organization. They've been so kind, respectful, and have really, you know, really embraced me in that space and given really positive feedback. So it's been really fun so far. And I'm just really excited to grow within that organization. And hopefully it goes big places for sure.
I know. Congratulations on that. But
Thank
I mean,
you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Kind of tying all together here. So you do betting shows, you're a sports producer, you'll be on camera too. You're doing stuff with the Pirates now. Like, do you ever get a break?
I know
Like,
it's a
I'm
lot, right?
about to say.
Hence the reason I've been like sick the past 2 days. Sound horrible. You know, there's a fine line in this industry between like doing too much and not doing enough, it feels like. I've always been a person, I feel like, that thrives off of chaos and just having a bunch of jobs, but I have gotten to the point, and I feel like it's really necessary in your career early on to do what I've done essentially with what I want to do, and make sure I'm doing as much as I can to help set myself up for the best possibility in my future. In college, I don't know if I had a dream job. I had a dream place. I wanted to be in Pittsburgh with my family. That's where I felt like I needed to be after college and what I could afford and where I wanted to be in this space. So I set myself up for that, and I was beyond happy to find jobs in here in this space. And then from there, you know, working, I'm a lot of freelance. So full transparency, this world now is turning a lot into freelance. So you can do multiple things at once, which is great. But there were times where I was working at the Pittsburgh Penguins from 9 to 3, and then going to KDK from 3 to midnight, a couple days a week. And it was a lot. And then throughout there, I'd be going to a high school football game, covering it for the Steelers from 5 p.m. till 4 a.m. when the edit was done. Waking up the next day on a Saturday, going to KDK from 3 to midnight. On Sunday, you know, going to KDK. Then Monday, doing the Penguins, and like it could get to be a lot at times. And I had to really start narrowing it down. So Rake Tech is what I'm employed under, but it's Picks and Parlays is the sports betting platform. They gave me a full-time job where it feels like I have some of the financial stability, but they didn't hinder me from doing anything else. So they know that on Saturdays, potentially during the football season, I could be on the sidelines for the Big Ten, and they were very congratulatory about that. The summer with the Pirates, you know, they were very open to that as well, and like, good luck, get it, as long as you're getting all your picks in and your bets done without the week, like, we're so excited for that. And then with the Steelers, you know, that was sort of like I knew every Friday night where I'd be, and then I was doing Pro Shop Live these past couple of months, helping them get a new form of media off the ground, selling merchandise from the Pro Shop from the comfort of people's homes through an app. So a lot of it is just a lot of balance and having an old school agenda and writing things down, but a lot of it is passion too, and just wanting to be really good at what you do and never wanting to say no to an opportunity because it could lead to something else. Now I feel like I am getting to that point in my life where I need to start focusing on a couple of things and really going into it. But, you know, I was a college student. I had loans to pay back. I had to find every financial means I could. And I also needed to put myself in spaces where I felt like I could succeed and grow as a person. So I am doing a lot of jobs at the moment, but I'm love every single one of them. And I'm very, very thankful and blessed that I'm employed at every single place that I am right now.
My next question is, so I actually found this on YouTube channel. I think it's actually kind of hilarious though. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was called, you were on a Blue Angel ride. Like, you were like on a plane.
I was.
You like talk to me about that experience was like, because I know for me, I would have been like sick. I don't know how you felt.
I was. So, oh God. Okay. There was a media company near me called LHTC Media, and they were covering the air show, which happens in Latrobe every year, whether it's the Blue Angels or the F-18 Hornets that come in to do the air show. And because we were covering it like in a streamed way, they asked if one of the broadcasters would be interested in going up in the Blue Angel. And full transparency, like, you have to pass a lot of health checks for this. So I ended up being somebody who was eligible to go up, and I did. And we put GoPros inside and filmed the whole experience. And I have like an hour of footage that is hilarious of me like passing out, gagging, like all the things. Because when you're up there, first of all, I almost didn't get to go up because the day was like rainy and cloudy. But so when we got up there, it was like a little shaky. And I didn't eat for like 2 days before. And when I got there, one of the pilots was like, "Oh, that was a bad idea." I was like, "People told me not to. What do you mean? It's too late. I didn't eat." Thank goodness I didn't eat, because I would have been blowing chunks everywhere. And it wasn't even from like the spinning and the circles. It was more of just like the being up there in the like the slower motions of like ins and outs and things like that. And it takes a really big toll on your body. Like, I give those men and women so much credit who do that, because they teach you how to breathe. And it's like, you have to breathe in, down, and hold. But in the matter of like 2 seconds, like, it is so hard. And that's why you see me passing out in the video, because we were pulling like 7 Gs and I did not have a chance to like fully engage. And so the one time it felt like I passed out for like a second, The other time it felt like I was sleeping for like 20 minutes. And it wasn't that long, but like my neck snaps. You can like see it in the video snap. And then I was definitely like gagging, but they give you like bags. And I didn't throw up. I just like spit a couple of times. But then I felt good when we were upside down. So the blood went to my head and it felt great. I was like, can we just stay here for a little bit? I am beyond thankful for that opportunity. It was so cool. My little brother and my uncle are like the two biggest Blue Angel buffs you'll ever meet in your life. They're obsessed with fighter jets. So they were there and they thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it was awesome. And they actually gave me, I have it here in my thing, I'll show you afterwards, which was really cool. They don't like break anything in here. They gave me like a signed Blue Angel picture with all the pilot signatures and stuff. So that was really cool as well, like with the date of my flight and everything, which is awesome. So they were incredible people. And just to be a part of that was, it was awesome. And I'll have to make a TikTok or whatever of the bloopers of that ride because it's hilarious. I have more. I'll have to do a comparison of like what I thought it was going to be like and versus what it was actually like.
Oh man. But like on a much I don't want to say serious note though, but like you recently, like I don't know if you started a podcast. It's called Mears And
yeah, that's through Picks and Parlays. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And like I've seen some of the guests you've had on. So you've had Ryan Clark, Jay Billis, Noah Eagle, play-by-play man for the Clippers. Just talk to me about that podcast and like basically like what it's about.
Yeah, so that's been a passion project of mine for a while. During the pandemic, I did hear them out with Hannah Mears, and I focused on a lot of the wrestling community, and it was just a podcast just to keep my skills up. But I wanted people to know that I'm not just this like young girl anymore. Like I am 25, about to be 26, and I can have a conversation in a space that's more mature. And so that's sort of where the Beers with Mears thing came. Plus it's like kind of fun, but also it's just to have like a good conversation with like solid people and talk about relevant sports topics while also just having a conversation about who these people are. So I wanted to grow and definitely be more of a show where we can talk more about sports and things that are happening on a daily basis. But for right now, I'm just excited and honored to have these guests on here and be able to talk freely in a space and have fun and talk about beer with Jay Billis and shotgunning beers and having a competition against each other and just getting those people in a space that's really fun and comfortable is a great time. Getting to hear Ryan Clark's opinions first and foremost about the NFL before all the Lamar Jackson news broke and getting his opinion on it and getting Noah Eagle's firsthand opinions about the Clippers, like the team he is so involved in covering. And then I just had Sam Coffey, who is a member of the U.S. women's national team in Portland Thorns, and she is trying to make a World Cup team this year and getting to hear her journey of how she got there, but what it's, what that's really like, so very cool to have a show like that and just to be able to talk to people on a daily basis. And Picks and Parlays gave me the opportunity to have a space to do it. So I'm very thankful and excited about it.
But my last question to you, you've kind of talked about a lot about people giving you advice. What advice do you have for people that are in the broadcast, journalism, any media field? Like, what advice would you give them as far as just trying to get a start post-college?
Network. Use everyone you can possible to speak to ask for advice. Look into things. Post-grad internships are not a bad idea at all. You're never going to start out making millions of dollars. If you wanted to, this wouldn't have been the career you pursued. But I would say getting experience more than anything is the most important part, because everyone's going to look and say, like, what have you done? Not what classes you've taken in college. They want to know what have you done. So I would definitely say just using your network and the people that you've built relationships with, keep those relationships. Try new things, make sure you're diversifying yourself in every skill set possible, and always apply for something. The worst somebody can say is no. And sometimes the job descriptions that are posted on these jobs are not at all what the job ends up being. I've worked and then seen the job description for like what my position was. And I was like, this is not at all what I do, but that's okay. They have to sugar it up a little bit. So never be discouraged. And the worst somebody always can say is no or not yet. And you never know what opportunity could end up being your favorite. So try new things, get experience, network, and just put yourself in the best position possible to succeed. You never know what you're going to love and fall in love with, but also have some thick skin while you're doing it, because it's going to get hard at times, but if you push through, you're going to end up exactly where you want to be.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Hannah Mears, Penn State graduate, sports producer, and on-air talent at KDKA. Also works at the Big Ten Network, Westmoreland Sports, doing work with the Pirates this year, some work with the Steelers and Penguins, and also has a new podcast called Beers and Mears. Make sure you check that out, by the way. Hannah, thank you for doing this interview. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been great to get to know you.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your Thursday and rest of your week, too.
Thank you. You too.